Do you have any concerns about how that may affect your podcast?
Hi guys, I'm Adam Wilborn from What Culture.
And I'm Andy Murray from What Culture, and you're watching Tom Talks Rubbish.
Subscribe below.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talks, and stand back for another interview. This time, I'm joined by Andrew Moore from the Tea and Tights podcast on bodyslam.net. So welcome to the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on. You've had some giants of wrestling media on your show, and I somewhat feel out of place. So really, thank you so much for having me on.
Nah, don't, man. Like, we'll get into what you do, but your podcast is like in my weekly rotation. So yeah, I was very excited to have you on. So if we take us back to the beginning though, where do you first discover wrestling?
God, not without revealing my age too much. My father's friend recorded 1990 Survivor Series. So it was the opening match. It was the Warriors. So it was Ultimate Warrior, the Road Warriors, and Texas Tornado versus Mr. Perfect and Demolition. And absolutely just fell in love with wrestling. That's why Survivor Series to the day is one of my favorites. I love traditional Survivor Series.
That wrestling at that time was very sort of colourful and very sort of outlandish, I'll put it that way.
Yes, which was good for me because I was quite young at the time.
Definitely, and it was definitely marketed towards maybe the younger demographic. So I'm curious to know, if you discovered that sort of wrestling today without any prior knowledge of wrestling at the age you are now, do you think you'd be into it or not?
I think so too, because the characters were outlandish, they were out, but it was still very hard-hitting action. And that's one of the things that I'll always enjoy about wrestling is good old hard-hitting action. If you try to compare that style to today's, yes, it's very different. Nowadays, so much faster, so much more high-flying, and lots and lots of moves, where back in the day it was quite limited the amount of moves, but I think I would still enjoy it.
What about if we flip the question and say you discovered today's wrestling as a child?
If I had seen the CPF as a kid, Callum Newman, Just Joe Lando, Danny Black, and Maverick Mayhew, I would have fell in love with them innocently, the way I literally did to this day. And props to Just Joe Lando for making his GCW debut recently. All throughout my Tea and Tights Twitter line, I'm just seeing so many people praising the young man, and it's fantastic to see, because about a year ago I was like, Just Joe Lando, Callum Newman, Danny Black, Maverick Mayhew are going to be superstars, and it's great to see it coming true.
Is it sort of because we'll get into how you work for the British wrestling, how you work within the British indie scene in a minute, but is there some sort of like, satisfaction might not be the right word, but you know what I'm trying to say, when you see the younger ones that you've seen on the indie scene for years slowly starting to make it on bigger stages?
Yeah, it's massive, because sometimes you'll go. I first saw them. It was a Wrestle Carnival show, and they opened the show as a fatal four-way between them, and it was definitely the first time I'd seen Lando and Callum Newman, and just absolutely blown away. And to see them getting out now in huge matches for GCW. I mean, Blake Christian is a superstar right now. Nick Wayne is a superstar right now. To see Just Joe Lando picking up those matches, and then you've got Callum Newman. He's set to face Anthony Ogogo for Progress, so that's going to be a really, really interesting. That's a huge match for him. He's like 19 years old still, so to have a match like that just shows the faith that people have in this young man. And as I say, it's great to see, seeing these guys grow. And, I've had them on my show, and just to see them continue to grow is absolutely amazing.
So we talked about when you discovered American wrestling, but how about the British indie scene? How did you first discover that?
I'll be honest, I used to be really down on the British wrestling scene. I just thought it was a bunch of people who didn't make it into WWE coming over here. So I really didn't know much till a few years ago. And suddenly Will Ospreay popped up on the scene, and Zack Sabre Jr. and a villain who we don't want to really name.
I think I know who you're talking about, but we'll leave that one there, shall we?
And I'm like, where are these guys coming from? They're phenomenal. So I started to look into it. NXT UK came about, so that helped so much more. And then you find out about Progress, ICW. But even now, when I first started the podcast, it was realizing how big and how deep the British scene actually is. It's ridiculous.
I was watching something the other day, and it was from a couple of years ago, so it might the statistic might have slightly changed, but I was watching something and it was like the UK has something like 70 indie promotions. It's crazy. You'll probably know better than I do.
I think somebody, a guy that I do follow, I think he worked it out that there's 100+ active independent wrestling promotions in the UK.
Oh wow!
Per capita, there's more wrestling happening in the UK than anywhere in the world right now. It's ridiculous. Wow. Obviously, some of it's not great, but some of it's really amazing.
Definitely. So you brought up there to getting into the British wrestling indie scene through discovering NXT UK, correct?
Yeah, that's to say. I know a lot of people tend to be down. Obviously, rest in peace, NXT UK, and
we'll get. I do have some questions about that, if that's okay. Your thoughts on that.
But I'm sure it's helped a lot of people learn more about the British wrestling scene and start to see that. Okay, well, it's not just a bunch of nobody names who can't wrestle. There are some incredible wrestlers throughout the UK. And it's been there throughout history, and it's amazing to see it starting to rebuild now and starting to grow again.
So obviously you brought up there about the NXT UK's closure and changing into NXT Europe in 2023. How do you feel like that's going to affect the indie scene? But more importantly, do you have any concerns about how that may affect your podcast, or just if your podcast may suffer because of that?
See, when we first started, it was 3 of us, and we literally just did an NXT UK review, and that was it. Then we started to just sprinkle in news, and then we saw RevPro UK were coming back, so we started watching their no fan shows, and then of course Progress. So without NXT UK, I don't think it's a huge loss, because we still typically get a weekly ICW show. There's always ICW Fight Club, which is fantastic on WWE Network. You then have Progress are running shows so often. TNT Extreme have just signed a new deal with Pro Wrestling TV, which is a free wrestling site where you can watch Warrior Wrestling, Women's Wrestling Army, and TNT Extreme now. They have adverts, but that's not going to suffer too much. So there's enough out there to keep me busy. And then you've also got WXW Germany, who I love to follow because they're doing amazing things right now. One of my favorite promotions out there is what WXW Germany are doing. But there's enough on the independent scene, and I've got a good few subscriptions, so there's plenty of reviews still to come.
Fair enough. What about for the indie scene as a whole in the UK? Do you think the closure of NXT UK will benefit or, I don't want to say discredit, or hinder the NXT UK scene?
See, it could be a double-edged sword where, it's fantastic. We're going to get all these quite big stars now coming back to the scene. Yes, that's going to create some interest. but that's also going to possibly knock a few young guys off certain cards.
Yeah.
I've talked about the fact that there's already so many promotions out there. There are already lots of wrestlers out there in the UK. So there's going to be a lot of competition, but competition is good. And I think it will benefit long run. And to have guys like Mark Andrews, Flash Morgan Webster, Eddie Dennis, all working with the young guys over in Wales, and then you've got Ashton Smith can return to Liverpool and start helping that scene regrow, possibly part of TNT Extreme. I think Primate back in the scene on the Northeast, he's going to be helping to train again the next generation of wrestlers, and so many incredible women's wrestlers. I'm sure Pro Wrestling Eve and a good few others are quite excited to have some of these big names and available for them to stream those matches, because there were NXT UK stars popping up every now and then on the scene. But I know from speaking to one of the promoters, about how that actually works, or like, yes, they could be on your show, but you weren't allowed to stream that match. So you won't be allowed to put it on YouTube or any of your video sites. But of course,
do you know why that is? Out of curiosity,
there was also a thing about the fact that they can't face anybody that's signed. So if anyone was working for AEW, anyone working for TNA or Impact, they weren't allowed to face them. I think it was NXT UK did struggle to really build a massive audience. And I think to begin with, it was because we could see a lot of these guys for £10 at our local promotion, rather than having to spend £50 for an NXT UK ticket and sit there for 6 hours while they tape, 3 shows.
Wow.
I remember one of the guys we do it with, Stephen Stowden, who we referred to as the tribal chief of the Big Fat Geeks. He told me about one NXT UK.
I think he sent us a question in, which we will get to in a minute.
Did. And he actually, he told me it's literally 6 hours that, you're there, and then it's constant one show, then the next show, and it's taping as much as possible. And I think expanding it to Europe is going to help WWE with that. Because there'll be less shows there'll be, say, one big show in the UK, one big show in Spain, one big show in Italy or any of the European countries, and then you're only going to take a few of the top stars rather than all of the top stars from one scene. So you'll only have like maybe 3 or 4 guys from the UK rather than an entire roster of 30 odd people.
Yeah.
So that's going to help the independent scene remain without losing all of their top stars in one go. So I think it's going to be good.
So if you had to guess now, just a one-word answer, do you think the indie scene in the UK will will flourish with the closure of NXT UK, or perish, basically?
Flourish.
Yeah. You're more likely that it's going to flourish, yeah?
Yeah, definitely so.
So if we move on to you and your work in the wrestling media, my friend, how do you connect with how do you start, basically? Is it through Body Slam?
Yeah, well, actually, I started with a very, very small company. It was Wrestling and Geek Culture, and I originally started writing about anime because I'm a huge anime fan, so that was what I was doing. And then every now and then writing 1 or 2 wrestling articles. Things didn't really quite work out with them. I didn't feel like they were helping me grow my audience or trying to promote me. So I decided to leave there, and it was about 2 years ago, I think it was now, that I saw somebody from Body Slam saying, "Oh, we're looking for writers, we're looking for people." And obviously I had a bit of a catalogue, so I sent them my work, and it's a much different team to the guys that are working there now, because I think I'm probably bar Cass, the longest serving writer at the moment.
Oh, really?
The new group is probably the best group we've been working for. Corey and Mark and the Code of Honor guys. the Pipe Bomb podcast, the Round Table podcast. It's an amazing team of Body
I've
Slam.
seen it grow since I've been involved since April. It's quite strange, isn't it?
Yeah, but the guy that I was working for at the time, he really helped to promote me. He was pushing my work out there. He was, tweeting my name, which the guys are doing now, and that was the big thing. That's why I've loved. And Cass has been so supportive. When I left the other company, they actually tried to sabotage me. They actually tried to message Body Slam, tried to say, and Cass helped me get through all of that. And so 100% grateful to everything Body Slam's done. And I was writing pretty much all wrestling news to begin with, but I started to just kind of narrow my work down eventually to British wrestling. I'm like, I'm here in the UK. Why am I not writing about UK wrestling? Why don't I let the guys in America write about what's happening in America?
Totally.
Why can't I just start to focus on the UK? I spoke to Cass about it. He knew I already had the NXT UK podcast, so he was like, yeah, go for it. He got me contact details for the Progress Management team back then. Obviously, it's a new team now.
Yeah.
But it's been an amazing journey, and Cass and all that, like the Body Slam guys, Jameis, it's just such a great group to work with, and very supportive. They know about the health conditions that I do suffer from, which is why I'm a bit of an inconsistent writer. I'm not, a lot of the time I'd like to write a lot more than I do, but just due to health conditions, sometimes I just can't.
Yeah, preach. I fully get that, yeah.
But Cass has always supported me through all of that, and it's just amazing. And for what I do for the UK scene, sometimes I'm like, is it worth it? But then I get messages from promoters in the UK scene, and they're like, oh, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for mentioning our guys. Oh, that guy, Just Joe Lando, you were talking about the other day. I brought him into my promotion for a show, and it was amazing. So cheers for letting me know about that wrestler. And I was recently at a TNT Extreme show, guy called Jay Apter, and I was feeling a little bit down. The podcast numbers seemed to be dropping a little bit, and I was a little bit down on what was happening. And I remember he took me to one side and he was just like, look, I love what you do. He gave me that free signed poster as well, with all the Mark Haskins, and he was just like, I love what you do for the thing. And then he actually said, you're my favorite podcaster out of everyone I listen to. You are the person. And I was just like, it meant so much to me. And so when you hear things like that, you're just like, yes, you're motivated again to continue. And it's great to get messages from wrestlers and promoters. And I just start to I love what I do. Sometimes I feel like I'm an imposter. I see wrestlers talking about the imposter syndrome, whether they belong. But I was sitting there. It was my stag weekend, and we'd gotten tickets to Progress, but we had spoken to the guys behind that, and I got to sit in the VIP area with all of my friends, and then suddenly you realize, you've got superstars all around you, all the wrestlers from the scene, and I'm just like, how and why did I get here?
Have you had that pinch me moment? Because I have a few times.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I got to interview Simon Miller, and that was an incredible experience.
FYI, and not to say this away from you, that's an interview I've been trying to get for over a year. So I am so jealous of you on that front.
He's such an amazing guy as well. Everything you see of him on YouTube, it is just him, because obviously I've managed to speak to him at shows since then, but also just like I think we were talking about the Progress show and his role within the new Progress as the host, and just such a great and wonderful guy again. And again, he was very complimentary after the podcast, and just amazing. But what was it? After the Super Strong Style 16 on the final day, I got to interview AEW's Anthony Ogogo.
I think I've seen that one.
That was absolutely amazing to me. I just couldn't believe that I was getting this chance to speak to, Anthony Ogogo. So I got to talk to him about the whole Cody Rhodes feud, why he hadn't been on AEW Dynamite for quite some time, and he's such an awesome guy as well, such a friendly bloke.
What has been the moment, like you've talked about a few pinch me moments, but what was the moment that you were like, yep, I've made it?
I don't think I'm ever going to feel like, yeah, I've made it. I'm not the most prolific tweeter or twitterer, and I tend to try and stay away from any IWC arguments, and I try to avoid making hot takes, if you like, just to keep myself. I don't think I'll ever feel like I definitely 100% made it. I just want to enjoy what I do. And that was the big reason I got into it in the first place, is I needed something to enjoy.
Fair enough. So how do you start doing the podcast then for Body Slam? If you're, I'll start that question again. If you're doing the writing, how does that turn into being a podcaster on Body Slam?
So it's kind of starts with I look through my the Tea and Ties Twitter profile, because throughout the week I'm going to be tweeting all the biggest announcements, all the biggest news stories, and then so just a couple of days beforehand, because it does take about a day or two to really collate all the information and start looking through all the promotions profiles, any news that I might have missed. And it's just trying to put it all together into one. I did at one point try to turn it into a newsletter, but it takes too long. Because a lot of it is thrown together, spelling errors all over the place, and terrible grammar throughout. And then it took when I first did it as a newsletter, it took me another whole day to go through to actually correct everything. But yeah, it's about collating that. All the news stories, and throughout the week we're watching as much wrestling as we possibly can. You know, if there's a new Rev Pro UK show on Rev Pro On Demand, we'll watch that. TNT Extreme, we've got a new show, we'll catch that. Progress ICW. Throughout the G1, of course, so I've been following Will Ospreay and Zack Sabre Jr. to keep people, how these guys are doing. It's also the N1 Victory at the moment, Pro Wrestling Noah, because you've got ICW star Jack Morris. He made his debut for Pro Wrestling Noah. And so, again, we're following his journey. We're keeping up to date with what he's doing. So we're feeding back to all of the guys. If we're at live shows, which most of the time each of us tends to at least go to about one live show a month. So again, we've always got the live shows to talk about. And yeah, it's just about collating all that together into one big document that I then send to Big Daddy Dan to have a good read through, and off we go. There's a lot of ad-libbing as well, because we like to try and be, we're a news show, but we also do our best to be entertaining.
Yeah.
I think our best ever episode was when we did a draft. What we did, it was the end of the year. Not much wrestling's actually happening to watch and so forth. So, okay, we need something to do. So we collated a list of over 150 male superstars, around about 100 women superstars. And what we did is we had to draft our own promotion that had to have 50 total and had to include so many tag teams and so many women's for a women's division. And we got so much great feedback on that one, because a lot of people, it was great because we'd go through why we chose this person, what makes this person appealing to us, and why we think he would be a good star. And again, it was just a great way to mention as many names as we possibly could in one episode.
Fair enough. So actually asking about how you started the podcast on Body Slam, how did it go from you being the writer to saying to Cass, I think I've got an idea for a podcast here?
Well, I actually had the podcast already, because when I left the one place, I decided, well, I'm going to try and do something on my own. I'm just going to do it. We sat down with two of my friends who had listened to the stuff that I was doing with the other company, and they're like, you know what? you could do one. You're entertaining. You're the reason they thought, but well, according to them, they thought I was the reason that it was good in the first place. So I was like, okay, well, would you guys do it with me? We can just talk about NXT UK returning, because it was just in time as NXT UK was coming back from the pandemic. So we're like, let's do this. And I came over to Body Slam, and what it was, well, if I write for you guys, would you guys take on my podcast and help promote it? And Cass was like, yeah. So the podcast came with me.
Okay. What are some differences then from your original podcast to how it is now on Body Slam? Has Cass asked you to make any changes? Did you decide to make any changes? Basically, what's happened?
No, Cass never. As I say, that's one of the reasons why I've loved working with Cass, is he's never trying to influence what we should be talking about or anything like that. He passes on the advice, if you can mention big names. So that's what we do. We have our top stories. So Will Ospreay's, if there's something happening in AEW involving British talent, if there's something happening in WWE involving British talent, that's what most people want to hear about. So there are big stories. And then we kind of tack on all the announcements from all the smaller promotions, kind of after we've gone through all that big news.
Okay.
But so he's provided plenty of advice for it. And as I say, when we first started, it was literally all we did was talk about the NXT UK episode. It was about 40 minutes long. Now, I think the longest episode we ever done was about an hour and 50, but I think our usual episodes were about an hour 20. We keep saying we need to cut it down to an hour, but we never do.
I've been there a few times. Yeah.
Always something to talk about, always something more that we need to discuss. So we're like, oh, got to get this done. We got to talk about this. And we've never tried to shy away from anything as well. So if it's bad news, we'll report that bad news.
I was just going to ask you about that. So obviously I'm going to get my dates wrong, but say 2020, I think, was when the whole Speaking Out movement was happening.
Yeah.
How what approach did you guys take when it came to discussing that? Because obviously at the time it was a lot of investigations and nothing was really proven, correct?
Yeah. Like I think we kind of started just behind it. So just as the Speaking Out is kind of not dying down, because it's never going to go away. What happened was absolutely disgusting, and there are still changes in the scene that need to be made for the benefit of all performers, for the safety of performers. There are still changes that need to be made, and that's also not just protecting wrestlers, but also protecting fans, and all the people that work backstage. So we kind of missed a lot of it, but then there was another company that their promoter got called out, so we just didn't shy away from it. What we tend to do is we try to take our entertainment out of what we're doing, and we just report it as a news story, and we try not to give many of our own opinions on things like that. As I say, any story about Speaking Out is still their story, and so it's we try never to go word for word. We never try to avoid mentioning victims' names in any type of progress. Paul Robinson, of course, was a big one because he actually made his return, but then didn't, and then being pulled and back and forth, and but that was one you just had to look at the facts of the story. You had to look at what she said, what he said, and try and take yourself out of it.
Yeah. What about then if you had started the podcast a little bit earlier and the Speaking Out movement was as big as it was at the time? First of all, would you have handled everything in the same way as you did handle it in reporting the stuff? And second of all, do you think your podcast would be as successful because people might have been down on British wrestling, maybe?
Yeah, definitely down on British wrestling. The rebuilding of the scene has taken a lot of time. But yeah, I think we would have looked to report the news and, as I say, not try to make it entertaining. I mean, even when we did the NXT UK releases, yes, we did a special episode. And normally I'm big, I'm animated, I've got a huge introduction. But because I felt like it wasn't something that I wanted to be so hyped about, that, you know, I had to take myself out and just say, well, look, this is what this episode's about. Not going to be my usual hyper entertaining, because what we're talking about is very serious.
Yeah.
And I think we would have stuck around and kind of taken that approach with it as well. Try not to take sides in any situation.
Definitely
like
not.
you're a news. You just in that situation, just report the news. You don't know the facts, and nobody will ever truly know the facts. But their truth is still always going to be their truth. And that goes for any person who spoke out in speaking out, whether we think, oh, it wasn't that bad. No, we don't know that. We don't know how bad it was. So we have no right to talk about whether it was that bad or not. We're not that person. We have no idea how that person felt. Yeah. And for that reason, as you know, I hate to say the word journalist, but
I hate it. But in some ways, that's what we are.
In some ways, it is what we are. And so, as journalists, what we have to do at that point is we just have to report the news as it is and take ourselves out of it.
How about how it impacted the success of your podcast? If you had debuted it a little bit earlier, do you think it'd be as successful?
It'd be difficult because, as you say, if we'd been very hyped about the scene just coming up and then suddenly speaking out happened, yeah, you're probably going to be like, what if I said I've been praising certain people and maybe I shouldn't have been praising them? And as you say, the scene was already kind of waning, and then something like that, it really did hurt. And it hurt. I know a lot of fans who have not returned to watch British wrestling because they don't think things can change. They don't think things have changed. They never want to. They've been triggered by certain experiences, and now they don't want to go back to wrestling. I remember it's the Daily Star guy, I think it's Adam Kelly. He gave a shout out to our podcast because we're quite a positive podcast. And
I found this during my research, actually.
A lot of people started calling, oh, you guys are just toxic positivity. You ignore the bad and you just go on about the good. I'm like, no, that's never been what we do. We've always reported the news. We're just more positive about the positive things. And if there's a great match, we're going to talk about a great match.
It's a catch-22, though, isn't it? Because if you were a Negative Nancy podcast and everyone was like, this is boring, all they are is negative, they'd be trashing you for that. So it's just, I'd say do what you're doing, man, because it's like, you'd rather be positive, do you know what I mean?
Definitely. I must admit, it did hurt, though, to see these people, suddenly not quite attack our podcast, because they didn't quite do that. But, yeah, there was certainly a lot of comments down on that gentleman's, Adam's post about, toxic positivity. I mean, I've never even heard of the term toxic positivity before.
Neither have I. Till you mentioned it, I've never heard of it.
I'm suddenly like, what is toxic positivity? And I remember I wanted to, I made a few snide comments on the next podcast that I was on, and I made sure, I know I can't be positive about this, so I've got to find something negative. But, I've never been one to shy away from it. If I think something's wrong, I'm going to say it. If I think, there's a certain way of wrestling that I like, and I'm huge onto technical wrestling. I do love a bit of high flying. I really don't like hardcore or deathmatch wrestling, and if I'm going to say that on my podcast, and luckily for me, my co-host Big Daddy Dan, he loves deathmatch wrestling, so he can talk about that for us, and he can talk about it in a positive light. But if I think like tag team rules, I'm big on rules being broken in wrestling. There are rules to wrestling, and I like wrestling to follow rules because I think that's the essence of it. It's supposed to be. So if I saw people making a tag to the foot, I'm gonna talk about it on the podcast, and I'm gonna say it's not good. I don't think people should be tagging the foot.
Yeah.
So
fair enough. You brought up your co-host there, Danny. How did he sort of become your permanent co-host? Was he one of your friends that watched the original podcast and said you could do it?
No, it was so Stephen, the other guy, the tribal chief. He spoke. He ran a group called the Big Fat Geek Life, which is kind of like a community on Facebook just for geeks, and you'd post geeky stuff in there and you'd chat. And I know Daniel was a member of that. So when I spoke to Stephen about, well, do you think there's anybody else out there we could maybe get on the podcast? He suggested Dan, and I was like, okay, go for it. And we just did the first episode, and we just got along. He's a absolutely awesome dude, a councillor in the UK for the Labour government. He does so much charity work. Yeah, he is one of the hardest working people I know, but he always still makes the time to watch the NXT UK and to make time for the podcast. And he's a really great guy. And so, as I say, I kind of knew him, but we certainly became friends more through just actually running the podcast together.
This has been a question that has come up quite a lot recently with podcasts that were started during the pandemic. Have you guys met up in person yet? Because I know a lot of podcasts that started in the pandemic haven't, as weird as that sounds.
No, definitely. I get that. Yes, we met up the first time. It was 2 shows we went to see. Now he lives down south in where I used to live, which is Hertfordshire, just north of London.
I know exactly where that is, man, because I'm an Essex boy.
There we go. But a few years ago, I did move all the way up to Marsh by the Sea, which is in the northeast near Middlesbrough.
Yeah, I know exactly where that is as well.
And now my wife's family. So we recently got married.
Congratulations.
They still live down south, so we went down south for a week to spend some time with their family. And whilst we were there, I met up with Dan. We went to see a RevPro UK show in Huntingdon, and then the next day we went to see it was Wrestle Carnival's debut show, and so we just went in to see those shows. And it's every now and then, whenever I get down south, I'll always try to arrange a show if there's a show happening at the time.
Fair enough. How apparent was your on-camera chemistry with Dan straight away, and how different is your on-camera to your off-camera chemistry?
I wouldn't say it's too much different. I'm quite. Both of us are a bit ADD, so we tend to have very similar paths, and we kind of it just clicked from the first episode. He'll give his views, I'd give my views. We didn't always agree on views, but we never argued those views. We would give our points of view across each other, and then just go, right, let's move on to the next part.
A bit like he loves deathmatch wrestling and you hate it sort of thing.
Not quite hate, but okay.
Dislike.
A little bit of dislike. Yeah, I think hardcore wrestling and blow off hardcore matches can be great. I'm just not a big fan of the whole scene as let's just do a death match for death match reasons.
Not to take sides in an argument, but I think I agree with you on that side.
But and yeah, he likes that. And so on the last episode, we were debating on who is the best wrestler in the world right now. Is it Kenny Omega or is it Will Ospreay? He sided with Omega. I sided with Ospreay. But yeah, as I say, we put our points of view across. We have a little back and forth, but then we just move on to the next bit without it developing into
an argument per se.
An argument, yeah. Although I did call him a traitor to the British.
Fair enough. One thing I am curious to know is, with the amount of British wrestling you have to watch, how much American wrestling do you keep up on?
Now, I used to literally always watch ROH till ROH folded. So that was a bit of a shame on Fight TV. I grabbed the weekly ROH episodes, so it was a bit of a shame to see that going. Mainly with WWE and AEW, I just kind of keep up to date via YouTube. So I've guys doing the news on them, such as What Culture, Cultaholic, Wrestle Talk, and whoever else. They're pretty much all talking about AEW, WWE. So that's where I kind of grab my news from. I'm a big lover of Japanese wrestling, so I still follow New Japan. I have the Wrestle Universe pass, so I still follow. I may not watch an entire show and just take pics of a match on those ones, such as G1 Climax. I didn't watch the entire G1 Climax. I just watched Zack Sabre Jr. matches and Will Ospreay matches. And kind of the Noah one, a few more matches. There's quite a few ones that I am interested in with Pro Wrestling Noah. But I don't get to watch as much as I'd like to, I would say.
Fair enough. One thing I should have covered during about your podcast section is, if Danny came to you and was like, I need to step away for whatever reason, or you came to him and said, I need to step away for whatever reason, would you still do the podcast?
I might have lost you, but I will try to carry on if it's recording me or not. If we can't always sit and do an episode together. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
There we go. We can't always sit and do an episode together. Sometimes timing just doesn't work out. And as I say, the tribal chief of the Big Fat Geek, he had things that he did need to deal with at the time, so he had to kind of step away from working on the podcast. But we welcome him back on any time he can get. We have him. He goes to watch UBW, which is Ultimate British Wrestling. It's a very small promotion over in Stevenage, although they still get Charles Crowley and the likes working for that. So he goes to watch those, and then if he has seen a show, if he can come onto the episode, brilliant. We'll have him on the episode. If he can't, sometimes he'll either send a written review for us to read out, and other times we've actually done it where he's recorded himself doing the review, and then we've just edited it into the podcast. So yeah, if any of the guys, they need to take time, if there's any reasons, life happens. Sometimes you can't always do things. You just try and carry on.
Yeah, what if you or Danny decided, I need to step away permanently? Maybe, do you think the podcast would still work?
It wouldn't be the same without him, but I'm sure we could just about. I know, Jameis, Mark, Corey, every now and then they've co-hosted the show for me. Sorry, Jameis has anyway, and I've done an Irish episode alongside Mark. So I think there'd be enough to cover it. It'd probably be a bit boring if it was just me. So I would definitely look to find another co-host. I'd like to find, if that ever happened. Hopefully. That never does. Hopefully myself and Dan can continue this on for a long time, because as I say, the feedback that we get from the promotions, the promoters, the wrestlers, it's something I guess people would like to see continue, because there's not enough people out there. Because I think it's a shame that Cultaholic, What Culture, and Wrestle Talk don't talk about British wrestling. I'm not calling them out for it.
Yeah,
but I do think it's a shame that they don't do,
I see what you're saying, though. They're British channels. They maybe it'd be nice they covered a bit of British wrestling.
Yeah, you can maybe understand with What Culture a bit more because they might have been a bit annoyed about WWE and NXT UK. So you can maybe understand why they didn't do NXT
Yeah.
UK. But, Wrestle Talk could still absolutely have done NXT UK shows, but they choose not to. And I just think it's I'm not disrespectful. It's just like, you've got that
It
audience.
does a
Why are you not?
disservice, maybe.
Yeah, why are you not giving the British wrestlers a chance? Now, I know Coaholic have some guests on every now and then. Is it Tom and his Desert Island Graps? He's had some British wrestling superstars. So, I can't totally go against what they did. And I know Wrestle Talk did that first pandemic show
Yeah.
when we realised alongside Will Ospreay. And I do know, I think it was they who bought Dragon Gate back in the day as well. So I'm surprised Wrestle Talk haven't done anything with that. It's just, yeah, as you say, and that was the reason I was like, well, I'm going to do it because there's since I've learned there are other podcasters that do talk about British wrestling, and we work alongside those guys. We try not to compete, we'll share, we'll retweet, all of their stuff, and they'll do the same to us because we're all here with one aim, and that's to try and promote British wrestling and to get British wrestling back to its glory days. I feel the only reason they're not looked at the way that WWE stars are looked at is because nobody's talking about them.
Yeah.
So somebody has to talk about them.
So you talked about someone needs to talk about them. If I was to put you on the spot and say one British wrestling promotion you feel like people are sleeping on right now, which one is it?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm going to eliminate Progress, Rev Pro UK, Pro Wrestling Eve, ICW, because they've all had. They're the big promotions in the UK. OTT as well. In TNT Extreme would definitely be a promotion in Liverpool. They've just become partners with the guys who do own Progress. So they've got a new partnership growing there. Pro Wrestling Chaos in Bristol. They sell out shows literally every week. North Wrestling, NCL, again, another promotion that literally sells out every show. Yes, it's only about 300 people, but guaranteed every time they run a show, they will sell out all 300 tickets. And they put on some great shows, and there's some great wrestlers out there that let's think of us. Wrestle Carnival are a phenomenal promotion. The promoter Gary Ward absolutely loves wrestling. He's just a big wrestling fan, and there are so many promoters that we speak to, and they don't really do it because they're out trying to make money, because there's not much money in it.
They do it for the love of the game, almost.
They're doing it for that love, and they're doing it to help other guys elevate, get them elevated. Like, as I say, I first saw Just Joe Lando on that show, and I was just like, wow. Callum Newman I had seen on Rev Pro UK a couple of times. I'm just blown away by the guy. He's phenomenal, and he's got some great size, and he's going to be an absolute superstar. I think one more, Discovery Wrestling in Scotland. They're doing.
I've caught a Discovery show. They are very good shows,
and they're very, very, very well produced as well.
Yeah,
and so definitely big props to them.
One organization that you didn't mention, but I love going to their shows because they're so good with the wheelchair access, so good with being helpful and stuff like that. Do you know WrestleForce at all?
Oh, WrestleForce, yes. They've got a real classic style, and they are all about trying to promote the next generation of wrestling. They don't have the biggest stars on the scene, but they have some great young guys. And I know Michael Oku, Connor Mills do regular appearances for them. But young guys like Mark True, he's going to be a phenomenal star in a few years. Jordan Saeed is another one. I
caught a Jordan Saeed match the last time I went. It was chef's kiss. It's amazing.
A great heel. He does a lot of work over in Italy as well with the Italian Wrestling Association. So he helps guys from the UK work over in Italy, and he helps the Italians come back over here
That's
as
cool.
well. And that's amazing to see.
Yeah, we went off on a bit of a tangent there. I do apologize, but I catch a WrestleFull show whenever they come to my town or whenever they come to somewhere that's like in driving distance. So I did really want to put them over for a few minutes. But
no, massively, definitely deserve it.
But as we look at wrapping this up, Andrew, because I do want to be respectful of your time, we're going to do a very quick segment that I call generic questions. Those of you that have seen my videos before will know this is where I ask my guests their favorite match, favorite event, favorite wrestler, and favorite tag team, and favorite theme song of all time. So, what's your favorite match of all time?
Oh God, that's difficult. It's a seriously difficult question. Will Ospreay versus Zack Sabre Jr., York Hall, Rev Pro UK. Absolutely phenomenal. I'm going to give best show again. It's going to be Epic Encounter, Rev Pro UK 2020. Is that show where Michael Oku and Will Ospreay put on that 5-star performance. That every match, that as far as I'm concerned, there's no match that deserved any less than 4 stars on that show. Every match delivered, and all in a completely different way. So I have to put over that Epic Encounter show for Rev Pro UK.
What about favourite tag team on the indie scene right now?
On the independent scene, Smoking Aces. I think it has to be Charlie Sterling and Nick Riley. They just came out of nowhere on Progress, and what a phenomenal! They've grown together so well. I want to shout out Crash Boat, who are a phenomenal, entertaining team. There's a young guy called Jack Bandicoot, who is one of the most innovative young wrestlers I've seen. He's a little bit on the small side, but he's an amazing guy. And the Pop Rock Prince, Jake Silver, he again is a phenomenal partner for him. They're great, and absolutely love them. Lycos Gym are so much fun as well.
And to wrap us up, because you named some wrestlers there, what's the best song being used on the indie scene at the minute?
Rev Pro UK's RKJ's theme, RKJ Rev Pro UK theme. I really love that. Or Maggot from WXW Germany. It's just instrumental to everyone. It's something catchy about the music. Everyone starts clapping, doesn't matter how. And I love seeing how over Maggot has gotten in this UK in Progress recently. But phenomenal competitor coming out of Germany. I'm sure WWE will be looking at him for WWE Europe.
Definitely. So as we wrap this up, Andrew, obviously I want to say thank you for coming on. But what the question I end all my interviews on is with YouTube, with podcasting, with social media in general. We're sort of going to live forever in some very sort of weird way. So what is one piece of content from yourself that you want the good people to check out? And then what is one that you're like, if you could please avoid that, I would appreciate it.
I think the draft episode, as I say, was just a phenomenal episode to do. We got to talk about so many just different wrestlers and wrestling promotions. I would probably take away from some of my early ones which I did do by myself, or any that I had to do by myself, because I always find it's so much better when I've got the guy to bounce off, and sometimes reporting the news by myself can be a little bit more boring. I try to be as entertaining as possible, but sometimes, as I say, without the back and forth, it can be difficult to be as entertaining.
Fair enough. And as we wrap this up, where can the good people find you and your content?
You can find me. I'm on Twitter. It's a very weird Twitter. It is at GB Otaku82. So it's GBOTAKU 82. That's because of my love of anime. As I said, when I first started I was going to be an anime guy, so I chose my Twitter handle as GB Otaku, which is the Great British Otaku. You can find the Tea and Tights podcast page, which has more followers than I do these days. But it's at Tea and Tights Pod. At Tea and Tights Pod. It's nice and simple.
Where can people find the show itself, though?
Oh, you've got to check us out, obviously, on the Body Slam net YouTube channel, and obviously everywhere you can get your bodyslam.net shows, Apple, YouTube, Apple, any of the other ones, Podbeans, all those ones. It's all there for Body Slam. You can also find us on the Johners Podcasting Network, which is a great group of network of British podcasters who do loads of different types of wrestling. So I've got to give them a shout out for all they do to help us as well.
It's well worth doing, guys. So if you guys like this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talk Trash. Follow me on Twitter at Tom Talk Trash. Follow, as Andrew said, bodyslam.net, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube for my show with Cassidy Haynes, the Wrestle Watch podcast. And follow the Wrestle Watch pod on Twitter to help us pick our match every week. And I will see you in the next interview. Goodbye.